"Welcome back, Commander," whispered the cyborg, her eyes shining after a decade apart. The stars outside the viewport were silent, cold, and endless. He had stared at them for 10 years, each one a distant reminder of the lives he had taken, the lives he had failed to save. Time had etched hard lines into his face, and war had carved wounds far deeper than skin. His hair was thinner now, his movements slower, but the weight he carried was heavier than ever. As the shuttle's docking clamps locked into place with a hollow clang, he felt his chest tighten. This station had once been his home. It had once echoed with laughter, arguments, and the constant hum of duty. Now he expected only dust and emptiness. The airlock hissed open, releasing a stale breath of recycled air. The corridor beyond stretched out like the ribs of some long-dead beast, dark and quiet. He stepped through, boots striking the steel floor with hollow echoes that carried down the empty hall. Every sound felt too loud. Every shadow felt like a memory waiting to awaken. He did not know why he had come back, not truly. Maybe to find some scrap of himself left behind. Maybe to bury the ghost of who he used to be. Maybe because he had nowhere else to go. Then he heard it. A whisper, soft and trembling, like the first crack of light through a sealed door. "Welcome back, Commander." He froze. The voice came from deeper in the corridor, from the darkness that seemed to shift with each flicker of failing lights. Could not be her. She had died. He had seen the blood, the broken body, the medics shaking their heads. He had given the order that saved her shattered frame, fusing bone and wire, flesh and circuit, but the woman she had been was gone. What stood in her place had been just machinery, or so he had thought. She stepped into the pale glow of the overhead lamps, and for a moment his breath caught like a snare. She was taller than he remembered, her frame laced with slender plates of metal that caught the light like polished stone. Cables ran beneath translucent skin along her neck and arms, pulsing faintly like living veins. But it was her eyes that rooted him to the floor. They glowed with a soft amber light, not harsh like machine optics, but warm, achingly warm. They shimmered like they were holding back tears. "After all this time," she said, voice still a whisper, "you came back." He could not speak. He could not move. His mind screamed that this was impossible, that what he saw was nothing more than grief twisting itself into a cruel shape. Yet the way she looked at him was not programming. It was not code. It was the gaze of someone who had waited too long, who had built her whole world on the hope that he would return. He took a slow step closer, boots scuffing the steel. "You are not supposed to be here," he managed to say, though the words felt small and wrong in his mouth. "I stayed," she replied, "because you told me once to hold the line." The memory hit him like a strike to the chest. Those had been his last words to her, shouted across a collapsing trench as fire rained from the skies. Hold the line. He had meant the battle. She had taken it as a command for her whole existence. His hands trembled at his sides. 10 years she had waited. 10 years standing on this forgotten station while he ran from the ghosts of the war. "You should hate me," he whispered. Her head tilted slightly, a small echo of the curious gesture she had made when she had still been human. "I do not know how to hate you," she said softly. "I only know how to serve you." His throat closed around words he did not want to say. The silence between them pressed like gravity. Somewhere deep in the station, distant engines hummed, and the old metal bones of the place groaned as though stirring from a long sleep. He forced himself to look away from her eyes, because they made something ache in him that he thought had long since died. When he finally spoke, his voice was low. "The station is empty?" Her glowing gaze flickered. "Not empty," she said. "Divided." A cold knot tightened in his gut. He had left this place thinking it would fade into the void without him. Instead, it had fractured. And she had stayed in the middle of that fracture, half machine, half memory of a soldier who had once laughed at his dry jokes in the mess hall. He felt the old guilt stirring like a buried mine. He had left her broken, and somehow she had rebuilt herself into something the universe had never seen before. She took a small step toward him. The sound of her footfall was light, almost human. They do not trust me, she said. They do not trust you either. They whisper. They plan. He met her glowing eyes again, and this time he saw no machine at all. He saw a soldier who had never stopped fighting, even when everyone else gave up. Then we will give them something to trust, he said quietly, though doubt gnawed at him even as he spoke. Something like a smile touched her lips, fleeting as starlight. Yes, she said. We will. The walk through the station was like wandering through the skeleton of something that had once been alive. The corridors were dim and cracked, their walls etched with the faded emblems of old divisions and forgotten campaigns. As they moved, shadows shifted behind half-sealed doors. He could feel eyes watching, even if he could not see them. The hum of distant machinery seemed too loud, like the place itself was holding its breath. She walked just behind him, silent except for the faint hum of servos beneath her steps. It was strange how subtle it was, how quiet her presence had become. When she had first been rebuilt, he remembered the heavy sound of hydraulics and the awkward stiffness in her movements. Now she glided like liquid shadow. She was still the soldier he had once commanded, but also something more. Something he could not name, something that unsettled him. They reached what had once been the command deck. The great observation glass that faced the stars was cracked along one corner, spiderweb lines glinting in the dim light. Consoles that had once pulsed with vibrant color now flickered with sickly static. A few figures were scattered around the room, their uniforms mismatched, their eyes wary. Conversations died when they saw him. Some stood, some backed away, and all of them stared at her. She came back with him, someone muttered. Low but not low enough. The ghost machine. Careful, another whispered. She can hear you. Her glowing eyes swept across the room, unreadable, and the whispers sank back into uneasy silence. He could feel the tension winding around them like a coiled wire. These people had survived here for 10 years while he vanished into the void. To them, he was a relic of a war that had left them scarred. To them, she was something worse, an echo of that war, built from the shattered pieces of one of their own. A tall man stepped forward from the group, shoulders squared, jaw clenched tight. His rank bars were scratched but still visible. "Commander," he said stiffly, "we were not informed of your return." "Was not sure I would make it," he replied, his voice flat. The man's gaze flicked to her, then back. "And her? You brought that?" "She was already here," the commander said. "She should not be." The words were sharp, cutting, and for a heartbeat no one breathed. He saw her shift beside him, a subtle angle of her head, like a blade turning toward a threat. He lifted one hand slightly. Not a command, just a quiet gesture to stand down. She froze, silent as stone. "She has kept this station running while the rest of us bled," he said evenly. "If you are alive, it is because she chose to hold the line." The man's face hardened. "She is not one of us anymore." "She was once," the commander said, "and she still is." The man's lip curled, but he said nothing more. He turned and stalked away, boots ringing hard on the steel floor. The others followed, glancing back with eyes that burned with suspicion. Soon the deck was empty again, silent except for the distant hum of the station's failing heart. "They will not follow you," she said softly behind him. "Not while I stand at your side." "They will," he replied, though the certainty in his voice was hollow. "They have to." He sank into the old captain's chair, its leather cracked and faded. For a long moment he just sat there, staring at the dead screens, feeling the weight of the station pressing down like cold water. He had commanded fleets, won battles that tore worlds apart, but this felt heavier than all of it. Winning a war was easier than rebuilding the faith of the broken. She stood near the cracked glass, gazing out at the endless black beyond. "You left," she said quietly, "but I stayed. I waited. They saw that. They watched me wait. It frightened them. Because they do not understand why," he said. "Because they fear that I do." Her words hung between them like a blade balanced on air. He looked at her, really looked, and saw how still she stood. No restless shifting, no wasted motion. like a statue carved from the memory of who she had been. But beneath that stillness he sensed something trembling, something human that should not have survived in metal bones. "Do you?" he asked at last. Her glowing eyes met his. "Yes." The word was soft, but it carried more weight than any oath he had ever heard. He felt it settle inside him, dangerous and undeniable. For 10 years, she had lived for nothing but his return. He did not know if that was love or something far more terrifying, and he did not know if he deserved it. The lights above them flickered, then steadied. Somewhere deep in the station, a klaxon gave a distant, stuttering cough, like it was trying to remember how to sound an alarm. He pushed himself up from the chair. "Then let them fear us for now," he said. "We have bigger problems than their whispers." She tilted her head. "What problems?" "Something feels wrong," he said, staring at the cracked stars beyond the glass. "This station is too quiet." Her gaze followed his. "It has been quiet for years." "Too quiet," he murmured. She said nothing, but he saw her eyes shift, the glow deepening as if something inside her was listening to the silence. For the first time, a chill crawled up his spine, because he remembered that long ago, before she was rebuilt, she could sense things he could not, tiny shifts in the rhythm of the world around her. And if even she was listening now, something was coming. She stood motionless for several seconds, as if the world itself had stopped moving inside her. Then her eyes dimmed slightly, and she turned back toward him. "The outer sensors are offline," she said. "They were taken down deliberately." His jaw tightened. "By who?" "I do not know," she said. "But I can find out." The words were calm, but he could hear the edge beneath them, like the quiet before a blade slides from its sheath. He followed her out of the command deck, boots striking steel in heavy echoes. The corridors seemed darker now, narrower, like the station itself was holding its secrets too close. Faint vibrations ran through the floor, almost too subtle to feel, like something vast moving far away. They reached the sensor control hub, a cramped chamber choked with cables and dead screens. The smell of burned circuits lingered. She went to her knees without hesitation, hands gliding over the panels. Tiny arcs of blue light danced from her fingertips, seeping into the broken systems like living threads. He watched the way her mechanical joints moved in perfect harmony with the faint flecks of remaining muscle, and it unsettled him more than the dark did. She was not just rebuilt, she had evolved. Sparks hissed, lights flickered, and one of the dead monitors flared to life, coughing out a static-smeared image. She leaned closer. Her eyes glowed brighter, burning through the distortion until the image sharpened. It was a map of the outer system. Small blinking icons showed the station's automated satellites, except half of them were gone. Their last transmissions ended abruptly, all at the same time, like candles snuffed out. "Show me their last scans," he said. Her hands danced across the keys with impossible speed. New images appeared, blurry shapes at the edge of detection range, long dark silhouettes against the starlight. Not debris, not rocks, ships, dozens of them, maybe more, lurking in the far black like wolves watching from the treeline. His stomach turned to stone. "They never left." "No," she said. "They have been waiting." He stared at the blinking shapes, and the war came roaring back in his mind. The fire, the screams, the silence afterward. He had thought it was over. He had left because he believed it was over. And now he saw how wrong he had been. The enemy had only gone still, like ash covering coals that were still burning underneath. "They will strike soon," she said. "Before this station can unify. They know it is divided." He tore his gaze from the screen to look at her. Her eyes burned with the same steady glow, but there was something else in them now, something harder. He realized she was not afraid. Machines could not fear. But the part of her that had once been human understood exactly what this meant. "We will have to warn the others," he said. "They will not believe you," she replied. "They will think you are desperate to reclaim your command. They will believe when they see it. They will see it too late." The truth of it hit him like cold iron. The people here did not trust him. They barely tolerated her. If he went to them with warnings of an unseen enemy fleet, they would laugh, or worse, they would panic and tear each other apart. Fear was already cracking them, and this would shatter them completely. She rose to her feet in one smooth motion, turning to face him. "We do not need their belief," she said quietly. "We need their obedience." "They will not obey me," he said. "They will," she replied. "If you stand beside me." He shook his head. "They hate you." "They fear me," she said. "Fear obeys faster than trust." He stared at her. The soft glow of her eyes was steady, unwavering, and he felt something in his chest shift. This was not the soldier who had once followed his every command. This was something else. She was no longer waiting to be led. She was offering to stand as his equal, or perhaps something even stronger. He wondered what she would become if they survived this, and if anyone would be able to stop her if she chose to rise higher than any human could reach. "Then we start with the ones who still listen," he said finally. "We do not have much time." They left the sensor hub and moved deeper into the station. The air seemed heavier now, as if even the recycled oxygen carried whispers. Word of his return had spread quickly, and wherever they walked, eyes followed. Conversations stopped when they passed. Groups dissolved into silence. It was not just her they feared now, it was the two of them together. He could feel the old chain of command fraying, the loyalty of the station's remnants pulling taut and thin like worn rope. In the old mess hall, they found a handful of soldiers hunched around dim lanterns. Their uniforms faded but their eyes sharp. These were the ones who had stayed on duty long after duty lost meaning. They rose when he entered, not out of respect, but wariness. "You said you would never come back," one of them muttered. "I lied," he said. "And I am here because the war is not finished." They stared at him. Someone laughed once, hollow and quick, like breaking glass. Then her voice cut through the room, quiet but razor-sharp. "The enemy is coming." They turned to her like dogs turning on a snake. Suspicion flashed in their eyes, hatred in some, fear in others. One of them stepped forward, jaw tight. "And why should we trust you? You are not even human anymore." "I was human enough to bleed for you," she said. The room went still. He saw their faces shift, not softening, but uncertain. The silence was thick as oil. He stepped in close, his voice low and steady. "Believe her or do not. It does not matter. What matters is that when they come, you will die alone. Or you can stand with us." For a long moment no one moved. Then the soldier who had spoken looked away first. Not in submission, but in something like shame. One by one they nodded, slow and reluctant. It was not loyalty, not yet, but it was a start. As they left the mess hall, she walked beside him without speaking. After a while, he said, "You handled that well." "They did not kill us," she replied. "So yes." He almost smiled, though it felt strange on his face after so many years. They walked in silence, but it was not the cold silence from before. It was something heavier, but shared, like two soldiers walking toward a war they both knew they might not return from. Somewhere deep in the station, alarms crackled to life for the first time in years. Not a drill, not a malfunction. Real. She stopped walking. Her eyes flared bright as stars. "They are here." The alarms howled through the station, long and low, like the voice of something ancient waking from a grave. Red lights bled across the walls, painting the steel corridors in the color of fresh wounds. The deck plates trembled under his boots as he and the cyborg sprinted toward the command center. Every sound was sharper now, the hiss of vents, the distant crash of shifting bulkheads, the thunder of his own pulse hammering in his ears. She moved beside him in perfect silence, gliding faster than he could run, her eyes blazing. She did not pant or strain. Her movements were fluid, lethal, unbroken. He felt a strange surge of pride watching her, even as the cold edge of fear sliced through him. This station was crumbling, but she was not. She was built for this. They burst onto the command deck. It was chaos. Dozens of half-uniformed crew scrambled between flickering consoles, shouting over each other. The cracked observation glass glowed red with warning lights, And beyond it, the black was alive with movement. Shapes slid out of the void, sleek and dark, like knives swimming through water. The enemy fleet had come out of hiding. "Shields at 20%, someone shouted. "Starboard batteries offline. They are cutting our comms. Hold your positions," he roared, and the voices fell still as if the air had frozen. Dozens of faces turned toward him, pale with fear, and he saw in their eyes the old habit of obeying him stirring like an ember in the ash. "We will hold this station," he said. "We will not break." Then the first impact hit. The whole deck lurched sideways, and he slammed into the railing as consoles erupted in sparks. A screen near him shattered. A fire burst from the ceiling, devouring a bundle of cables in a hiss of molten plastic. The sound was like the sky tearing open. Someone screamed. Someone else was already dead. She moved like lightning, seizing a fallen console and tearing out the burning wires with her bare hands. The fire died instantly, snuffed out by her grip. Smoke curled around her like a shroud as she turned to him. "They are probing our defenses," she said. "This is only the first wave. Then we make them bleed for it," he growled. The deck trembled again as another barrage slammed into the outer hull. He forced himself upright and staggered to the central console. The tactical display was a mess of static, but through the flickers he saw the enemy ships forming a half-circle around the station. They were cutting off escape, herding them in. Classic siege formation. He had used it himself once long ago. The memory tasted like ash. "They are trying to break morale," he said. "We break them first. They outnumber us." One of the officers stammered. "They always do," he said. Then her voice cut through the fear like a blade. "Bring the rail batteries online." The officers stared. "They will tear the hull apart," someone protested. "They will tear you apart if you do nothing," she said, eyes glowing brighter. "Do it." Her tone was not a request. It was command, and they obeyed without even realizing it. For a moment he saw it, the flicker of something he had not dared to name. She was not simply following orders anymore. She was leading. The deck shuddered again. He leaned closer to her, his voice low. "They will listen to you." "They are listening to you," she said. He almost told her that she was wrong, that their obedience was only reflex from old wars, but he stopped, because he could see the truth in her glowing eyes. They were listening to both of them now, and for the first time in years, he felt the faint thrum of something that had died inside him. Command. "Rotate the station," he ordered. "Bring the starboard batteries to bear." Steel groaned deep in the bones of the station as the massive structure began to turn. Outside the cracked glass, stars swung past like distant lanterns. The enemy ships fired again, streaks of white-hot plasma searing across the void. The station's hull screamed under the impact, but the old plating held. "Rail batteries charged," someone called. "Fire," he said. The deck leapt as the massive rail cannons unleashed. Brilliant white streaks tore into the dark, slamming through the enemy's forward ships. One exploded in a blossom of fire and shattered steel, and a ragged cheer rose from the crew. The sound of it was wild, desperate, almost joyous. Another impact shook the deck, closer this time. Sparks rained from the ceiling. He steadied himself on the console. "They are boarding," he said. "Prepare for close quarters." She stepped closer to him. "I will lead the counter-teams." "No," he said instinctively. Her glowing eyes locked on his. "They will not follow anyone else." He wanted to refuse, to keep her beside him, but he saw the truth. She was the strongest weapon they had, and if she fell here, this station would fall with her. He swallowed hard. "Do not die again," he said. She gave the faintest trace of a smile. "I will wait for you." And then she was gone, a streak of motion disappearing into the smoke and chaos. He watched her vanish and felt the air around him grow colder, heavier. He had sent her into the fire again, just as he had before. The last time she had come back broken and remade. He wondered what she would become this time, or if she would come back at all. The alarms wailed louder. Enemy ships closed around the station like a tightening noose. He slammed his hand down on the console. Seal all bulkheads. Deploy internal teams. We hold this line. The station roared as though answering him, its old guns screaming defiance into the dark. The corridors shook with the rhythm of distant explosions, each one like the heartbeat of some furious giant. He could hear the clash of metal boots on steel decks, the crackle of gunfire echoing through the bulkheads, the screams of men and the cold, mechanical shrieks of the enemy. Smoke curled along the ceiling like dark fingers reaching for the dying lights. The station had become a battlefield again. He strode through the command deck, barking orders to the scattered crew as the tactical display flickered with chaos. Enemy boarding pods had slammed into the outer hull, cracking open like iron seeds to spill soldiers into the station's arteries. The defenders were falling back corridor by corridor, bleeding for every inch of ground. And at the center of it, cutting through their lines like a phantom, was her. She moved across the surveillance feeds like a storm given form, slashing through the enemy with inhuman speed, her body a blur of steel and shadow. Plasma bolts scorched across her armor and glanced off. Blades shattered against her arms. Her movements were precise, efficient, almost beautiful in their cold brutality. He watched in silence, feeling that old knot of guilt twist tighter. She had become everything he had once feared he would make her. Unstoppable, tireless, and utterly alone in her violence. Section 7 breached, a voice cried across the deck. We are losing the reactor wing. Seal the bulkheads, he ordered. There are still people in there. I know, he said. Seal it. The officer froze, eyes wide, then obeyed. Steel doors slammed down through the station's arteries, trapping the enemy inside with the fires of ruptured conduits. The display showed dozens of hostile signals winking out in the blaze. Dozens of friendly ones, too. He forced himself not to look at the names. He could not carry them now. Not yet. Another feed flared to life her, again, standing in the shattered remains of a corridor, surrounded by broken machines and bodies that had once been men. Smoke curled from her scorched armor. Her glowing eyes turned toward the nearest security lens, and for a moment he felt like she was looking straight through it into him. Then she spoke, her voice crackling through the comms, calm even as fire raged behind her. They are pushing toward the reactor core. If they breach it, the station is finished, he said. Yes, she replied. Then I will not let them. She cut the link before he could answer. He clenched the railing until his knuckles ached. The enemy had chosen their target well. The reactor was the station's heart. If it fell, everything else would die with it. And she was running straight into the center of their advance alone. He forced himself to move. Orders kept his mind from breaking. He rallied squads, redirected power to failing shields, rotated the station to bring more batteries into line. The old crew began to move with him, their fear folding into focus, their doubt cracking under the weight of necessity. For the first time since his return, he felt them beginning to follow again. Not because they believed in him, but because they had no choice. Survival was louder than pride. Then the lights flickered and went black. The hum of engines choked into silence. The air grew still, thick, heavy. The whole station seemed to hold its breath. Power grid failing, someone shouted. We are blind. A soft blue glow flickered on the edge of the dead screen. A new feed. She had forced it online. The image was blurry, smeared with static and smoke, but he saw her standing in the reactor chamber's outer hall. The enemy was everywhere, dozens of them, armored shadows pouring down the corridor like a black river. She was alone at the choke point, her frame scorched, her armor cracked and sparking. Her movements were slower now. Even her inhuman body had limits. Then she spoke, her voice steady but softer than before. They will reach the core in minutes. Fall back, he said into the dead calm line, though he knew she could hear him. That is an order. She did not look at the camera. You told me once to hold the line. His chest clenched so tight he could barely breathe. That was 10 years ago. I remember, she said. I remember everything. Then she moved. The feed dissolved into chaos. She leapt into the flood of enemies like a blade thrown by a god, tearing through them with a fury that made even the steel walls quake. Explosions flared around her. Shards of molten metal spun through the air like burning snow. Enemy after enemy fell, crushed under her hands, split by her claws, thrown into the fires of ruptured conduits. But each strike cost her. Plates shattered from her arms. Sparks erupted from her ribs. A glowing cable ripped loose from her back and sprayed blue light like blood. And still she fought, even as her legs faltered and her arms slowed. "She will not survive," someone whispered behind him. "She will," he said, though the word felt like glass in his throat. "She has to." Then the feed flared white. The explosion swallowed the corridor. The shockwave slammed through the station, rattling the command deck and knocking him to his knees. The screens went dead. The lights died completely. Silence fell, deep and absolute, like the station had finally stopped breathing. No one moved. No one spoke. Then, slowly, the lights began to flicker back to life. Power crawled through the systems in ragged pulses. Emergency fans coughed back to life, stirring the smoke. A new image stuttered onto the screen. Static, smoke, debris. And through the haze, a single figure standing. She was half buried in the wreckage, armor scorched to black, one arm hanging in twisted ruin. Sparks hissed from her ribs. Her head rose slowly, as if lifting the whole weight of the world, and her eyes glowed faintly through the dust. "She held it," someone whispered. He said nothing. He just stared, the air burning in his chest. Against all reason, she had held. Beyond the cracked observation glass, he saw the enemy fleet beginning to break formation, drifting backward like a dark tide pulling away from the shore. The station's guns, still smoking, pounded them as they fled. The black was filling with fire. The battle was ending, and somehow, impossibly, she was still standing. The station hung in silence, turning slowly through the cold dark like a wounded beast that had survived the hunt. Its outer hull was scorched and broken, whole sections gutted to empty frames. Debris drifted in slow arcs around it, shards of enemy ships, the husks of burned-out drones, and the glittering dust of shattered steel. The great guns were silent now, their barrels cooling in the starlight. Smoke curled from ruptured decks, rising into the void like the last breath of something that had fought too long to die. Inside, the command deck was hollow with exhaustion. Officers slumped against railings, bleeding, burned, faces gray with grief and victory. No one spoke. The adrenaline was gone, leaving only the weight of survival pressing on their shoulders. He stood among them like a ghost of his former self. Armor cracked, skin split, hair matted with ash. He felt every year, every wound. Yet beneath the ache, something still burned. The sharp, fragile ember of hope. "Sir," someone whispered. "She's in the med bay." He turned before the words finished leaving their lips. The corridors were chaos. Stretchers jammed against the walls, wounded calling for water, engineers staggering under broken conduits. But he moved through them like a shadow. Every few steps, someone froze when they saw him, like they were seeing a myth they thought had died long ago. They saluted, hesitated, then lowered their eyes. He said nothing. He had no words left to give. The med bay was dim, its lights flickering under the weight of power fluctuations. Machines hummed softly, patched together from scraps by hands too tired to care about perfection. And there, in the far corner of the room, she lay. First he thought she was gone. Her body was almost unrecognizable. Blackened armor peeled back like burned skin, exposed circuits twitching with faint light, one arm completely severed. Her chest was a lattice of cracked plates and broken servos, wires glowing faintly where they bled synthetic light. She looked small for the first time, small and still. Then her eyes opened. Two soft points of gold burned in the shadows, flickering like candles fighting the wind. She turned her head, slow as the turning of the stars, and her voice came out as a whisper of static. "Commander!" He crossed the room before he knew he was moving. He sank to one knee beside her and reached for her remaining hand. The plating was cold, cracked, but when her fingers curled faintly around his, He felt the faint pulse of energy in her grip like a heartbeat. "You disobeyed orders," he said quietly. "Yes," she whispered. "You would have done the same." His mouth twisted, not quite a smile, not quite sorrow. "Yes, I would have." For a long time they said nothing. The world outside faded. The hiss of medics, the hum of broken machines, the distant rattle of repair crews, and it was just the two of them again, as it had been once on the edge of dying worlds. He could still see the soldier she had been, that fierce young soul who had followed him into every fire. He could see the machine she had become, the unyielding thing of steel and light that had saved them all. And somewhere between those pieces he saw something else. Something neither of them could name yet. "They're afraid of me," she said softly. "They were," he answered. "They won't be now. They will be." A faint flicker crossed her eyes, something like sorrow. "They will always be." He thought of the looks he had seen on the faces of the crew. The awe, the fear, the way they flinched when her name passed their lips. She was right. They would rebuild the station with her legend wrapped around it like armor. And legends were always lonely things. "They'll have to learn," he said at last. "And so will we." Her gaze lingered on him for a long, silent moment. Then, faintly, her lips curved, just enough to be almost human. "Will you leave again?" The question hollowed him. He had left once, chasing the ghosts of lost wars, fleeing the weight of all he had broken. It had nearly destroyed her, nearly destroyed him. He had thought distance could dull the guilt. It hadn't. It had only sharpened it. "No," he said. "Not unless you do." Her eyes dimmed briefly, then steadied. "Then I will stay." They sat together in silence until the medics returned, muttering about repairs and circuits and neural cores. He rose slowly, his body aching as if the war had carved new years into his bones. As he stepped from the room, the station's hollow corridors stretched before him like an old battlefield waiting to be rebuilt. He could feel the eyes of the survivors watching from the shadows, fearful, reverent, uncertain. They did not cheer. They did not salute. They only watched, waiting to see what he would do now that the killing was done. He glanced back once. She was watching him from her cot, her eyes burning faintly through the haze, and for a heartbeat he thought he saw stars reflected there. Not the stars beyond the hull, but the ones that had always pulled him forward into the dark. There would be other battles. The enemy was broken, not gone. Somewhere beyond the outer rings, he could feel their shadow gathering again. The wars would return. The dead would rise from memory to walk beside him once more. But now, for the first time, he would not face it alone. "Welcome back, Commander," she had whispered to him when he first stepped aboard. He finally let himself whisper back, so softly that only the silent walls heard him. "I'm home."